Okay, got that. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first BSME webinar panel discussion on online safety. I'm really glad and happy that all of you could join us today. It is our inaugural session, and we are very excited to see how the discussion pans out with all these heavyweight experts that we have in the room today in our session. BSME Regional Network exists to enable collaborative professional development that's impactful locally and internationally. Across all British schools and across all British educational institutions. We're connecting leaders, teachers, and specialists to go and share best practices, be collaborative in policy development, and to see where is the next trajectory of educational innovation. Today's focus will be online safety in the post-AI era, practical policies, leadership, and routines and classroom strategies that protect learners and us as practitioners while supporting innovation. Agenda is going to always be learning together. We are going to have this meeting recorded, and it will be available to all BSME members via the BSME website. A few housekeeping rules is that as we are going to have the panel discussion for the next 50 minutes with a 10-minute Q&A session at the end. Each of our panelists will be available during that time to answer any relevant question targeted towards them. We are definitely going to try to keep track of time, but it may slightly overplay a little bit longer, but please be aware we are going to try to put in the Q&A session at the end. Our slide deck will show the questions that are going to be sent out to our panelists that are available, and each of the panelists will be sharing their views and their understanding what that would mean in a context. Please keep your mics muted, and we are not going to enable the mics until the Q&A session. You can put your questions in the Q&A chat box, and then we will have those questions delivered to the intended panelist by the end of the session. So sit back and enjoy our discussion for today. I'm going to give each of our panelists some time to introduce themselves, give a contextual background where they've come from, and also talk about their expertise with regards to online education. We'll start with Olly.
Hi everyone, Olly Lewis. I'm Head of Secondary here at Amity International School, Abu Dhabi. I'm also a BSME Leadership Network co-chair. I think that's the right term. I co-authored the EdTech Playbook with a good friend of mine, Mark Anderson, and have a passion for education and kind of have evolved in technology over time, I think.
That's great, Olly. Thank you for that. Zoubiya.
Hi, everybody. I'm Zoubiya. I've been in education for 20 plus years, worked my way up from unqualified teacher to regional director of schools, and I work currently in advisory. So I work with school owners, schools, school leaders to support improvement and change. I also write quite frequently everywhere about educational leadership and philosophy sometimes and how things can be better. I'm very passionate about change in the most wonderful way, and keeping children safe is another one of my things that matter a lot to me. So that's why I'm here.
That's fantastic. So we have a lot of passion there. Thank you. Priya.
Hello, everybody. So my name's Priya, and I am CEO of PMC Safeguarding. I am a social worker by background. I've worked with educators for the last 24 years. So yes, and like Zoubiya said, everything safeguarding and child protection is an absolute passion of mine.
Thank you so much, Priya. Magdalene.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Magdalene Bashir, and I'm here representing Pulse Ed, which is a professional learning platform. And we're dedicated to supporting teachers' growth through practical, personalized development. My background is in science and science education and leadership, and I'm really passionate about a holistic approach for learning for the students and for teachers training. And I'm very mindful of teachers' time. So anything to save any teacher's time, I'm open to it and passionate about in a way that is relevant and sustainable. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Magdalene. Last but not the least, David.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm David Ardley. I've been in education far too long. I've been working in the UK, France, Switzerland, and Saudi Arabia was my last position as a founding head. I'm currently on a work break, but looking to set up, I've got to be careful, I don't like the term consultancy at all, but advisory, as Zoubiya said, I think is a good term to support colleagues in schools from teaching through to leadership and parents. That's in progress and will be going shortly. But my passion for this, I'm a design technology teacher by trade, so I've always used digital technologies in what we do. And then I got interested in marketing and digital strategy, and then the safeguarding aspect came in as I moved through to leadership. The whole lot is a complete mix. And then recently, I've been really interested in how parents play a partnership role in how we educate on digital citizenship with the children in our care. And then I've also noticed how adults also struggle, teachers and parents, with understanding this kind of complete tsunami of digital technology that's going through. So support mechanism is where I'm at the moment with it, but I have a passion for everything kind of digital technology and how schools can keep it in their, woven within their kind of schemes and tapestry of where they're going. So that's where I am with it at the moment.
That's perfect, David. You just set the tone for the entire discussion and the context.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, we needed that. Okay, so we're going to look at the agenda right now. We've looked at our array of panelists and their rich backgrounds. For the rest of the webinar, we're going to look into deep dive questions on AI and EdTech impact on education. We're going to finalize it with remarks from all of our panelists, built up from the reflective conversations that we've had in the webinar. And then we have questions to our panelists. The first thing I think everyone is eager to know is about policy. Since 2020, hybrid learning and generative AI have started shaping online behavior and education, and then people started growing aware of the risks that are involved. Today, we'll look at how policy would look like, particularly the safety expectations evolved post-AI and hybrid learning era. And what are the biggest gaps in terms of compliance the schools are facing. I'd like to direct this initially to Zoubiya to give us her point of view on this.
Well, it's a big area. Policy and AI, it seems it can be extremely overwhelming in an already overwhelming kind of landscape where policy and tick boxing is already an issue in schools, where compliance is seen as something that must be done rather than is lived. So when we talk about safeguarding, we need to look at online safety. We really need to understand what the trust levels look like. Do we trust the existing policies? Are they lived? Are we ensuring that everybody is a custodian of what is expected? And are we responsive to new developments, which we've seen, the pace of change is so fast. Are we agile enough to recognize a deep fake or a disinformation-based video in education? How are we, what's our cognitive framing? What are we carrying in our minds? And do the policies we have for online safety, for safeguarding, for parent engagement, and all of the above, take those into consideration truly? So from a policy geek perspective, I always look at if what I see matches what is said, And if it's not, those are the gaps that we need to do. So that kind of, I know teachers and leaders are very, very busy with everything else, but safety, there's nothing bigger or more important than ensuring children are safe. So I think awareness, being understanding if policies fit for purpose, and also building in time for people to reflect when it's too fast paced. I think those are the first steps that I would take if I were a school leader like I used to be. Well,
Thank you, Zoubiya. That was insightful. From a whole school perspective, Olly, could you add in what your perspective is with regards to this?
Sure. The fundamental shift from, I guess, the lens of online safety, moving from just the historical kind of just content filtering and e-safety, now has a much far broader remit, like Zoubiya has identified there. It's now kind of digital risk management, I think, at scale across a school. So, historically it was around just keeping children away from inappropriate content. Well, today it's far broader than that. It's around protection of digital identities, understanding the ethics around the data that's generated and used, and then navigating that kind of content and data usage across schools. So, as a school-based level now, the expectation is that, we have to have new expectations and understandings around things like algorithmic transparency. So many of these AI tools that are now hitting the market or have hit the market, whether they're a kind of augmented or adaptive learning platform or something that automates feedback, it requires the school and the teachers within the school to have a really clear understanding and kind of communications around how that data is used and the outcomes that are generated off the back of that data. There's also an expectation now, I think, for schools to actually have that kind of 24/7 safety accountability, where historically it only happened in the building, whilst you're at school. But we would advocate with parents, look, when you go home, these are the things you need to be aware of. This is what children of this age group are searching for. Whereas now there's an increasing expectation for educationalists and institutions that learning occurs beyond the classroom. And safeguarding now extends far beyond that as well. You could argue it extends to your home network and the student-owned devices, as well as non-school related platforms you use. So there's a balance to be had there for us at school, where we work in partnership with parents so that they're cognizant of what safety looks like for them at home and in that private space. But also, what we advocate for in my school at Amity is that you can opt into the school-based kind of time-based profiling or 24/7, so that we can move as an institution from being reactionary to being proactive, so that we are working in partnership with parents. And that enables you, and I think the expectation on all of us as educators, to have that expectation of kind of real-time risk detection, and that's the growing pressure that we all face in our lives around that monitoring of harm and in all digital spaces, which are seemingly endless, right? And as more marketplace kind of progression takes place with some of those AI tools, flagging of those safeguarding or child protection concerns enable us to be more proactive and garner kind of student messages and behaviours in that digital space. So I think that's the new expectation on us as schools in this kind of post-hybrid AI-generated world.
I think it's now that the perspective was the school environment, but it's grown wider. And that's amazing perspective, Olly, because previously it all centered around what's happening in school. But now the question comes up that what are the kids bringing from home? Because that also has an impact in the learning environments and effectiveness in the school environment. Thank you for that. We're going to go to safeguarding impact, and I would like to move this question to David. From advisory point of view, because that's the role that you've been advocating for schools, and the patterns of misconception with regards to digital safeguarding. What concerns you the most today in this very, very fast-paced developing AI technology industry with EdTech, with numerous AI coming in with ChatGPT and multiple versions of it? What concerns you the most?
Thank you. I think leading on from what Olly's just said there, schools quite, I think, mistakenly think that they have a total responsibility here to safeguarding on all these things. And as much as AI is currently in our face and across the educational landscape, it started previously. We've seen the smart mobile phones over the past 20 years. We've seen social media, the Netflix adolescents coming through, and how that influence comes on board. Not the problem, but the way in which this works. Most young children get their initial lead from their parents at home. They see how they interact with the technology. They see over the past 15, 20 years, it's the iPad, it's the phone at home, the work is at home. And a lot of children take that as a lead at a young age, 3, 5, 7 years. Schools then pick up and have to, I say deal with it, that's unfair, but then they have to put in their user policy, for want of a better term, to kind of get safeguarding in place, make sure that well-being is being upheld. And it's becoming very difficult. It's not just an AI thing. It's a whole, it's a complete landscape. And I think the main thing is to remember that in all of this digital technology, that we still have to retain a human element. The humans look after, oversee, and guide the children and the adults in their care in schools. And so that focus it's quite a passion for me at the moment, but anthropology to guide this, so how humankind actually interacts with this type of thing. That said, schools have a massive task and responsibility, and those are in leadership at the moment. And I remember from last year, you have national laws and national legislation coming through. UAE, Qatar, Saudi, the UK have published these quite lengthy, text-based documents on how to use AI in education and how you should look at it. And rather than focusing on resilience of the people engaging with it, it's a constant feed, or it seems to be, on the issues associated with it. We need to build a resilience, and that's why I'm quite keen on core digital citizenship in schools, to educate children, teachers, parents on how we can actually take that human lead and get children to understand and get adults to understand how you can do the equivalent of the kind of zip it, flag it, block it mentality, and work with AI. This stuff is not going away. It's I use the term a lot. Forgive me, Zoubiya. I know you have a go at me. I'm not going to use robust in this reply, but it's ubiquitous across what we do at the moment, and you're not going to stop it. But we need to look very carefully at how we engage with it. And I've become aware of late how important the role of parenting is in this as well, and working in partnership with schools. Because as someone else has already said, this does not stop when the bell stops at the end of the school day. Yeah. It's the most dangerous part, actually. I mean, for those schools that engage in I don't like the term, but banning or restricting use, look, I respect whatever decision you take. But thereafter, who takes on that supervisory and guidance role when those children are away from a safe pair of hands from the school gate to home and on weekends? And so getting that human engagement in place, I think, is massively important.
I like the part where you said about the impact of this digital revolution that's happening on the social fabric, on well-being of kids. And I want to take that to Priya, if you can give us more insights into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was thinking as you were just chatting there, David, about our teenagers and the fact that their brains are still not developed. They still don't have that prefrontal cortex. They don't have the ability for higher level reasoning, critical thinking. And then we've got, lots of misinformation. We have lots of deep fakes, and for them to understand that what you necessarily see is not the truth. We talk, when we talk safeguarding, we often talk about the 4 traditional categories, or a 5th if we add in the child on child category. But one of the things that I'm quite passionately talking about at the moment is the mental health aspect, and the safeguarding of mental health aspects. There's been lots of studies that have come out. There was one in August that looked at 6 months of TikTok and Instagram. Like our teenagers, the majority of them are scrolling, doom scrolling on Instagram and TikTok. And what's being aimed at our children at the moment is, for girls, very quickly, body image, things to do with eating, dieting, what they should look like. And for boys, it's the misogynistic rhetoric that they're getting. So when we're talking safeguarding and we're talking policy, and we're talking AI, these are the kind of things that we need to, I pick up exactly what you were saying, David, that we've got to get away from that traditional online safety. We need to look at everything else that's hitting our teenagers at the moment. And it's quite terrifying if we think of the amount, another study done in 2024 that looked at the media use of children between 3 and 17 years old. 96% of them are online. So our little kids are on tablets. And, I don't think our parents are aware of how much potential damage, it comes under affluent neglect, how much damage they may be posing by constantly giving a child, a digital a device. Some children are going into school, they're not school ready. They don't have the vocab that they need. They aren't able, they haven't got fine motor skills. They don't have gross motor skills because they're sat in front of a laptop, a device, handheld something for the majority of the time. So definitely we need to be looking at safeguarding in a much more holistic way.
Yeah, I can completely understand that a lot of parents, when they come into schools, they always share their concerns that my child is always on the iPad. I'm really concerned about what they are looking at, what content they're accessing. In terms of educators being prepared with such kind of situations where kids are deeply involved in tools, digital tools, appropriate or otherwise. So I want to go to Magdalene. What do you think would teacher training look like in the future? How should that shift from traditional teacher training to prepare educators with regards to safeguarding when it comes to children and accessing digital tools?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think here teacher training needs to be really collaborative between all of the teams in the school. In order to actually have an impact, it needs to be done consistently, and everybody is talking about holistic approach, which I absolutely agree with. It can't be done if it's not holistic, and as David said, holistic really does start at home. So I think if we are going to go into teacher training and that holistic approach, it needs to be consistent. It needs to be a policy that is seen, as Zoubiya said, on the ground, lived. It needs to, and that policy really does need to come from understanding the school culture. Where are you as a school culture so that you do have a policy that is implemented realistically on the ground? If it's just one policy that is rolled out without the context of the school culture and the parent culture, it just won't work. So I think in terms of enforcing or basically having that teacher training, it needs to be consistent, understanding the context of the school and understanding the stakeholders in the school. And then, like I said, it's just consistent and visible on the ground. I think short, personalized PD is always best. And because we're looking at something that is completely new, it just needs to be, everybody's going to be doing it.
Thank you so much, Magdalene. I'm going to go back to Olly again with regards to safeguarding again, because this has imminent impact on our classroom environment. So with regards to online safety policies and adapting to things like deepfake and data privacy, how can we use the power of communication to make sure that all stakeholders are aware and also the school is taking action to maintain that aspect of safeguarding and that breaches are not happening? Yeah, your thoughts on that?
There's a lot to unpick here. Fundamentally, policy needs to move from kind of a reactive rule book to an agile framework, which I think is what Zoubiya very first kind of started at. They need to be capable of addressing new and unknown kind of threats. Some of those shifts might include, like you signposted me there, deep fakes, misinformation. So we need kind of explicit policy on media literacy, I think, and the verification of sources, and potentially the acknowledgement where AI has or has not been used, or even in the realms of possibility, actual AI detection tools. Many places are moving now to kind of AI disclaimers or transparency policies where the school is defining when and how AI can be used. Leon Furs has done a great piece of work on that with his AI assessment scale, and how that can be effectively be used by staff and by students. And if disclosure is required or not, and at what kind of level. So it's around kind of creating that critical digital literacy, I think, across subjects. It's not just ICT's responsibility. It's not just part of your kind of PSC HME responsibility. It's collective. It's everybody's. 15 years ago, we would stand in schools and say that, literacy is everyone's responsibility. Numeracy is everyone's responsibility. But it's the same thing with digital. We need deep fake awareness education. So students need to be able to critically evaluate the digital media that they're seeing, and actually get them from a position where they're not just consumers, but they actually can effectively create content and then ratify the creation of that content. So you need kind of robust incident, I guess, response protocols as well wrapped into that. So if there is a data breach or AI misuse, you've got that clearly defined and then a clear escalation path within there. And on the theme of kind of data breaches, because we're essentially talking data here, whether it's created or by the student or by the school or by an EdTech vendor, we need emphasis on staff training around that, I think, in terms of data protection, and then the privacy settings on platforms that we use in our school. We should be transparently talking to colleagues around what that looks like and why it's that way. Ultimately, in many parts of the world, we've got kind of data protection champions or a GDPR lead. Well, probably that's going to happen in this region of the world quite soon, with movements of that. And it's helpful, I think, if they are people that are on the ground in classrooms, leading and running with technology, rather than someone that's kind of isolated from that. So there's kind of lots to unpick there, but clear guidance, clear academic integrity, clear ethical AI use, signposting of when it was used, how it was used, clarifying the roles of teacher and AI, I think, in terms of assessment and feedback, and policies that kind of advocate and include AI disclosure. So when it's appropriate to use it and when not. So kind of summarizing all of those thoughts, we need something that's ongoing, that's a digital literacy development, kind of agile framework, I think, that's not just punitive. Technology can be super powerful, but it has to be paired with that kind of transparency that we're all talking about here. It has to have feedback loops and mechanisms in there, and probably most crucially within a school-based setting, with respect to teaching and learning, it has to have clear pedagogical intent. And I think that's probably where, as a sector and as schools, we'll get that right. It's going to have to move from blocking and banning to empowering critical thinkers in the future generations, because the reality is that's the world that they are entering into if they haven't already done so.
Yeah, I can hear that. If you could add to that, Zoubiya, because you are on the ground with schools and you are facing a lot of, I'm sure, safeguarding policy issues. If you can add to that.
I actually didn't realize it was my turn already. I was actually going to jump in because I was like itching to say something. I think we have, blurred safeguarding parameters. Let's be clear. Things are blurry. And that grayness is what we're all navigating and trying to use our best judgment with. And I can't, if I could put this in a neon sign for this webinar, we can't replace professional judgment with algorithms.
True.
There's no substitute for professional judgment. All the years that we've put in, all the scenarios we've seen and felt, and then seeing the reactions to surprising sometimes, completely challenging, paradoxical situations that we've all individually experienced. No algorithm will generate you a response that will take care of all of that. So that's, I think, one thing that I'd like to say. And the second thing I'd like to say is, we need to be pro-innovation, but anti-naive. Like we need to be aware and open to all the opportunities, but we need to also think about what the implications and what the masterminds, we've got some amazing students who, we ran a webinar yesterday with 100 participants from many different countries, and we did a Mentimeter with 100 people, educators who are very relatively tech savvy, and they said children and teenagers are using AI more readily than the teachers are. So when you've got that scenario, there's also disinformation and misinformation. They're not the same. Misinformed is just you told the wrong thing. Disinformation is where you're deliberately fed the wrong thing, the wrong mindset, the wrong approach. And when children are exposed, they can't decipher mis and disinformation. They can't decipher that. And we can't sometimes decipher that as adults. So there are many, many layers to this, and the last point I'm going to make, because this is one I'm particularly passionate about, is rule of thumb, if you aren't comfortable with the information that you're feeding into AI being published on the homepage of your school website, don't feed it into the AI. That's a rule of thumb. If you don't want it there, if you can't imagine it there because it's sensitive, don't put it in the AI. So that's my kind of communication, like don't communicate with it. Be aware of dis and misinformation. Have conversations with the vendors that you use and are thinking of using when you're appraising. Have a good rubric for their philosophy behind what they're doing before you decide on a vendor as well. And think about when a breach happens, can you do a pre-mortem, post-mortem on how it happened, why did it happen, and how can we prevent that happening again for novel data breach situations that you didn't foresee? So that's my 2 pennies on that. I'll pass it back over to you, Rehana.
Thank you for that, Zoubiya. I completely understand when you say that, you want to innovate, but don't do it for the sake of innovation. You do it if it's impactful and if it's contextually relevant. Now, moving on to leadership impact, I want to take this to David again. And the question is, how do school leaders and teams ensure that it's a consistent behavior, that the expectations of digital behavior would be consistent among all stakeholders, let's say students, staff, and parents, and they know what are expected from them?
Thank you. I'm just reading what you've got there. I wasn't expecting that to come my way in a good way.
Sorry to put you off.
Oh, no, it's a really good one. I've made some notes here just based on what Zoubiya and Olly and others have been saying, and I've just noted here it's about building long-term skills that children and adults can spot manipulative AI content, and that's part of where we come into this from a leadership aspect. One of the biggest not shortfalls, but where schools tend to trip up a lot. There's 2 areas, I think. Firstly, there's an assumption that education knows the stuff that they do, especially when it comes to teachers and your staff teams. There's an awful lot that comes their way, and we identified this at the beginning of this online podcast. Actually, staff are busy people, and so this is just one more thing to stick into the old into the soup that they're trying to work with. But from a leadership standpoint, and as Zoubiya has flagged as well, the safety of the children and the adults in our care when it comes to this has to be a paramount driver. Now, you can't rely purely on government incentives or your external providers because they're not all watertight and they're not all great at what they do. I'm not trying to be dismissive there. Your school knows what it knows best. But I think I come back to it, retaining the human element and your diligence on this goes forward. One of the things I will say about this, about how can you manage expectations, I've just come out of quite a lengthy process with with a colleague at the school. They had 96 policies in place to do with digital technologies and relevant things such as sanctions and so on and so forth if it's misused, and so on. We got it down to 26 because no one is mapping a lot of this policy work that goes on in schools. So it becomes very content heavy in terms of the amount of literature that you're trying to deal with. We need to simplify this. And again, I made a note here about having a responsibility, transparency, and fairness, and making that a common theme across your policies, whether it's about digital technologies. And that's a mammoth area, isn't it? We know about that. And we also always we tend to look at the use of digital technologies in school, especially AI. It's about academic integrity only. And it's not, as we know, it's about safeguarding and building the resilience and getting youngsters and adults to identify when there is something which is manipulative in terms of its digital presence and what you've got. Facts the other day I learned, there's only just under 40% of our great libraries and institutions work is digitized. So the algorithms and the bots are still bouncing around in a very shallow swimming pool at the moment in terms of what they get. So it's not all factually accurate. It's not all correct. And as we've seen recently with, online videos of, may she rest in peace, but the Queen riding a moped and being stopped for speeding by police and these other things on these deepfake, videos and so on and so forth. Children being able to identify the reality against the fiction, the fantasy and all this. We've all stumbled on it. We all see it. It's when you see a cat surfing in Hawaii or a dog, climbing over a similar mountain, as an adult that is probably going to be unrealistic in terms of a real thing. But for youngsters who are still building that mental kind of rigidity, it's not there. So how getting that resilience in place through the policies that you put in place? Too many policies, no one reads them, they go away. So synthesizing and bringing that down and making it common across all areas of what you do. It's not just AI or use of laptops or use of phones if you have them in schools or your computer-aided design that you do. I fell foul in Switzerland. I'll be honest, I hold my hands up. We digital strategy. I used email with Microsoft Outlook. The age for using email then at the time, going back, was 15. We had kids less than 15 using email. I know just to give an example, social media things, ages range between different countries too. I don't know what they are now in the Middle East for certain things. You can fall foul quite quickly if you don't do your diligence, but don't rely on the outside sources to tell you. So from this here, how can school leadership ensure consistent digital behavior, keep it human, and keep somebody or some people on it all the time? And it's not just someone's responsibility. Last point, sorry, then I'll stop. It's like you've got an ICT or computer teacher. It is not their job to teach computing to all the kids and all the staff in the school. They facilitate certain things, but there's a responsibility there, a shared responsibility. It's exactly the same with digital technologies. All teachers don't have to be at the top of their game with regards to how they use the stuff, but they have to have awareness so they can then cascade that down to the children in their care. And as leadership, we need to cascade that out to our parents and our teaching staff and make sure that we have, as far as possible, a level playing field in terms of those policies and, dare I say, user guides for this. That's where I think the biggest impact can be from a leadership standpoint. I went on too long there. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, David. Thank you. Lots of takeaways from there. Priya, would you like to add something to that?
Just picking up from what David was saying there, and I think, Olly, you said it earlier on about whose responsibility it is. It's safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. And we say this as sometimes it just sounds like some kind of a statement that we make, but safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. And with that, we need the practical responsibility as well. And how are we bringing our parent body on board? Picking up on what Olly said earlier on about it doesn't stop at the school gates, and we need to be working with our parents, engaging our parents. Because to be fair, I think there's a lot of parents who also maybe wouldn't see the misinformation or disinformation. A lot of parents who genuinely see things, they're scrolling on TikTok and whatever. So it's about helping our parents start to understand what is their responsibility in role modeling the use of digital technology, and you know, we as educators, let's work in partnership with them. Let's have those service level agreements with our parents. You know, if we're asking our students to sign acceptable use policies, what do our parents do at home with them? You know, what kind of digital agreements have we got at home? So that would be, you know, I'm aware of time, so I won't say too much more than that, other than to say we also have to have the practical requirements as well.
Yeah, I can understand that, Priya. A lot of parents are not aware when they sign off things like accept all cookies, and they don't give a second thought about these things. They are not aware of how data privacy is such an essential understanding, and there should be workshops. And I know a lot of schools in Dubai are trying to conduct workshops to educate parents about data security. I'm going to go to Magdalene about training and supporting teachers who lack confidence with regards to digital literacy. They aren't proficient enough. And then reporting any kind of online safety red flags. How would that look like on the ground?
Thank you for the question, Rehana. I really think, I mean, from everyone, what everyone is saying, honestly, this seems to be like a full-time role on its own. So I think that we really need somebody just for this role, or even if it's somebody that is at school on a very low timetable, so that they can actually keep up with the trends, the current policies, the advisory part of it, and just be able to cascade the information down to all of the teams, so that that consistency is there. I think short, regular meetings work really well. Maybe, for example, that person can go to all of the departments and cascade the information in 5-minute departmental meetings that are regular, to share the trends and issues. And again, it's about that collaborative approach. So that person would also make sure that the parents are involved, make sure that the workshops are being run. Like I said, it seems to be like a full-time role, and maybe a new position. Now schools need to be looking at opening up these positions in school.
Any thoughts from Zoubiya, Olly?
I'm happy to jump in, but I'm happy if Zoubiya wants to go first. There you go. I completely concur with Magdalene there. It's around that kind of whole school safeguarding culture in I guess in the digital age. That sounds jazzy as well, doesn't it? Right, the digital age. I think culturally amongst ourselves, we have to normalize that it's okay not to know everything. Like even if you might have a point person, a leadership person, in your school that disseminates that information, you know, they can't be expected to know everything all the time. So kind of normalizing amongst your staff body that it's okay not to know everything. And you know, we've got to acknowledge that first and foremost. You know, the landscape changes so rapidly. So it's around then, I think, reassuring staff that you can build confidence in that. You know, you're not going to be a tech expert overnight. That takes time. And you know, like we've said many times already on this webinar, core safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. It's not a niche skill set. So if you're not sure, ask. You know, don't kind of come from that lens of, you know, if you get it wrong, you've got a problem. You know, that stops staff from reporting things. You need to remove that fear and build a culture of training that actually we're in it together. We're going to evolve and develop this as we go. Magdalene is quite right. Targeted training, 100%. You know, give them scenario-based training as well, that provides that kind of practical, realistic training that's focused on recognizing behavior changes, signals that there might be an issue online, identifies kind of those red flags and student interactions that might or could occur on a particular platform, and what that activity might look like, so that staff build that kind of tacit knowledge of what inappropriate or concerning content might look like, or those behaviors might look like, so that they can then respond. So it's helpful if you use things like case studies, or what would you do in this scenario? And just have that open, honest discourse as a team and say, look, actually, with this scenario, there might not be a right answer, but how would we collectively tackle it? We've talked a lot around policy, and I'm now thinking, actually, should we in my school call it a kind of digital code of conduct rather than a policy, and build that culturally within our context and settings so that it signposts and signals what we want, that we should collaboratively develop this together as we move forwards, and have those kind of clear reporting pathways, because ultimately that we have that from a safeguarding viewpoint in schools, right, in our particular context. So should it be any different digitally? And I'd probably argue no in some contexts, but we would need to know what a red flag looks like, and how to tell it and how to log it and what happens next. So that's just, again, around your consistent reporting mechanisms that are in place across your school, whether it's, My Concern or other platforms are available. But there's a few pieces of thinking. I don't want to kind of steal everything in case Zoubiya has some stuff to add to that.
Obviously, you stole about 5 of my points already, Olly. I think it's really important that we have a culture of professional curiosity, and that there should be no silly questions, no question too small or too big to ask, especially when it comes to that question resulting in more children being protected from harm than otherwise. So that moral weight should make you ask, right? The fact that I'm not even a little bit unsure, that doubt should translate to, I have to be curious about this and I'm going to find out more. And there is this, well, I'll ask later. I've got cover to do. I'll ask later because I've got these big stack to mark, or I don't get along with that person. So I don't really want to. The moral responsibility and the repercussions of accountability. I must be honest, I've heard many cases recently across the region where there's it's criminal. I.e. you get taken to court because you didn't take care of certain things. And that, if it isn't that you're not naturally professional curious, at least be accountable for the fact that you are directly responsible for the children in your care. So for some people, it's the people part, some people it's the rules. So different things speak to different people. So if you're a rules person, do it because of the rules. If you're a people person, do it, but just do it. Do it because it needs to be done. And if you're not sure, ask. Yeah, that's my piece.
Yeah, I think just like how physical safeguarding and every other kind of safeguarding is taken seriously by educators, I think digital, it's the momentum to build that awareness is taking time. And I guess the idea being shared here is that it should be a community effort. It should be individual responsibility, and every awareness is the key to make sure it moves forward. Right. Now, final question with regards to educators' impact. I want to take this to Priya. In what way can analytics that we get from learning platforms, there are so many LMS systems in place in schools, how can that leverage ethical behavior from our students, ensuring student protection and not compromise privacy? I know it's a big one. I've thrown it at you. I hope.
Yeah. I'm laughing that I've got the data analytics one as well. That's probably, anyone who knows me will be going, why she got that question to field?
I'm rocking back in my chair at the moment here, Priya, just ready for this one.
Honestly, people who are on this webinar who know me are going to be absolutely laughing and howling at the fact that I got to field this question. I think the reality is that it's like any other safeguarding filters that we put in place. We need to be looking at the patterns. We need to be looking at the referrals that come in, whether that's on My Concern or CPOMS, the other platform that's often used, and listening to our students. I think with data analytics as well, one of the things we haven't really spoken about is the student voice. And what are we? I know Zoubiya, you spoke about yesterday a webinar, and you had the Menti etc. But how much are we doing in terms of actually talking to our students? And part of that is the safeguarding culture that we have in a school. How psychologically safe are our educators feeling? How psychologically safe are our students feeling to come and tell us what's going on? And when we get those, if I think of the data in terms of the referrals, incidents that have been brought forward, that's where we look at what is the preventative work that needs to be done. If I think of it from a well-being point of view, there are schools now have lots and lots of those apps that are used to kind of filter through well-being concerns, and a lot of that is around what children are experiencing online, and using that kind of data to then inform policy and practice within a school. For me, that's how we're going to do it in the best way. Not compromising safeguarding, and getting our students on board as well. But I'm sure somebody else who's great at data would give a much better answer than I have.
Oh, your answer was wonderful. It hit the target where we haven't mentioned student voice, and that's a really impactful, and that's really qualitative data you'd get from students' voice. It's unmatched. It informs so much. I'll just open it to any of our panelists who would like to add in their thoughts.
If I may just briefly, it's picking up on Olly's point there. I think one of the headaches that many schools have is they think it is their responsibility to generate all this safeguarding documentation. Of course, there is a responsibility, but it's a shared responsibility. We're talking about partnerships with parents, but schools working together, there's no point reinventing the wheel, because in your area, be it UAE or the UK or United States, wherever, schools together in partnership, as we used to have subject kind of group meetings, can have meetings on this. And Magdalene mentioned, and I think it's a good point, someone like a digital strategy, I don't know, advisor or lead or whatever. It isn't about IT or whatever. It's about how you are informed, how your teams, your students are informed, and how they inform you on how everything from social media and AI is being used. But if schools work together, we'll develop this sanction or whatever policy you want to call it on what happens if you get it wrong based on government guidelines and everything else. We'll look at how we can look at it in terms of how we're putting it into curriculum and how much time we're giving digital citizenship and curriculums. And then once you've got 3 or 4 or 5 schools in an area working together on it, you're not having to regenerate, and you also get that mapping of excellence coming out. So it ends up as one lighthouse of excellence with all the kind of peripheries around that are fed into it. And I think that's an important thing there, that Magdalene and Olly have highlighted. It's not just a school's responsibility. You're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat with this. It's affecting all of us, impacting all of us. And the last thing is, kids are digital natives nowadays. They are very good. So that student voice is absolutely right and coming through. It's the adults that need educating. I'll be honest. The students are much better at getting it. They get it wrong, of course, but there's an awful lot that they get right and understand. And they're very good at filtering themselves. But we should listen to students as much as well. Sorry, there you go.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I have 2 pennies on this. So
Yes.
I was involved in a national youth program over summer, and interestingly, the students were a little bit unclear of what they were consenting to when we had media consent. And interestingly, a lot of them said, so when we were taking photographs, for example, they said, I didn't consent for you to take my picture, for example. And when we looked at the pictures, there were pictures of hands. So they weren't the pictures of their body, like faces, identifiably, but they were actually saying, no, I don't consent for you to take my picture at all. So interestingly, that agency and what we perceive to be identifiable is still their right. They have a right to decide if they are captured in an image or not. In schools, when people go around and take pictures. Similarly with IP, intellectual property. If a student has written a really interesting poem and we're running that through an AI tool, does that tool, have we checked that intellectual property remains the students? Have they consented? So I think those issues that came up in that youth program highlighted to me new care we have to have, having not been AI and AI natives that matter to them, but maybe seem trivial or not really a big deal to us, but for them it's a big deal because of what they know might happen to the images, or just because they want to know what happens to their information. So I think there's a split. Some kids are really savvy and others maybe aren't, but we need to be aware that that agency and that voice that Priya mentioned encapsulates when we take pictures of students' work. We get their permission first before we put it somewhere. And those kinds of things are taken care of. And last point, I'll be really quick. All safeguarding, all protection happens nested in culture. So if we talk about safeguarding in the UAE context or Dubai context or Sharjah context, it will look different in those contexts. And what we consider acceptable and not as care in Sharjah is not necessarily the same in Dubai. Similarly, privacy, what's considered private in Sharjah, and having been a school leader in Sharjah and having been a school leader in Dubai, I can completely vouch that my whole understanding of privacy changed when I went from London to Dubai to Sharjah over a 15, 20-year period. So bearing in mind the definitions, shared definitions of these things is also critical to ensure everybody understands safeguarding in a cultural context and from the perspective of students having agency and choice in where their data is used or not used.
Thank you, Zoubiya. That was so many takeaways from that. I think talk on that alone would be an hour long. It was a lot of information that really, really fills us with a lot of reflective thoughts. And coming to our final remark, and as I predicted, we would overrun the time. It is 6:03. If I can ask everyone to give me 40, 50 seconds of your takeaway, final remarks from this amazing panel discussion. We can start with Olly first.
Thanks. I'm just trying to process what I'm going to share because so much gold has been shared on this. I think I'll go online safety in the kind of digital age is about building the good, and it's about building culture. It's about resilience. It's about being informed and developing your kind of evidence base of information. It's around developing cognizance around ethics and then creating critical digital citizens. And I think we achieve that through human leadership, not tools.
Perfect. Zoubiya?
I think echoing a little bit from Olly. Olly, I love what you just said, by the way. I think it's culture, not compliance, that keeps children safe. And I'll say it again, what I said earlier. If you wouldn't publish it on the front page of your homepage, don't feed it into the AI, okay? Because it will utilize that information potentially to misinform or disinform. And we don't know the ethical background of any AI owner. They may have very commercial intent. And the last thing, and I said it earlier, that I would say it again and again and again, we can't outsource professional judgment to any algorithm. We are humans, we're complex, we feel, we need to take care of more than just what's typed. We need to take care of the whole child, the community in context of the culture that safeguarding happens. So that's mine.
Thank you, Zoubiya. Priya?
So I know we've talked kind of the policy bit. So my takeaway is the procedure bit. And it's that stakeholder awareness program. And that's all the stakeholders, parents included, as well as our educators, and most importantly, children at the center of everything we do.
Very well put. Magdalene?
Thank you. Like I said, Olly said, and Zoubiya, so much gold and so many nuggets here. It's difficult to just, have 40 seconds of remarks. But for me, I will say, I took away definitely your moral responsibility outweighs everything. And that moral responsibility really does come from the relationship between the teachers and the students and the whole community. I think as well, a very important part that maybe we haven't touched on is that any digital tool or EdTech that is being used in school needs to be reviewed and needs to be almost like vetted, almost, and also for, leadership needs to foresee the problems and the safeguarding aspect of any digital tool that is being used by the teachers. I mean, it's all well and good, to be creative and have all of these ed tech tools that are saving teachers time, but again, they all need to be vetted, by leadership. So thank you very much, everyone. And I really liked as well what Olly said about developing a digital code of conduct rather than a policy that does make it more consistent and for it to actually be rolled out on the ground by everybody.
Thank you, Magdalene. David?
I'll keep it short. It's thank you for this discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Really, really insightful. Lots of stuff there. Lots of really good things. Two things for me: keep it human. Don't allow AI and any forthcoming digital technologies. We have to remember this is organic. This doesn't stop here. I'm mature enough, he says carefully, to remember when the internet and Wi-Fi came out. Everyone said that was the end of the educational world, and this was going to be hassle. Then we had smartphones. Or laptops first, then smartphones. The same or similar discussions about safeguarding risk and so on and so forth came to the fore. This isn't new, but I think the rapidity of AI and where we are with it is what's concerning. So we need to keep it human. Don't allow AI drive us. Let the schools, humans, drive our use of it in supporting learning going forward. And the second thing is just remember you're not alone. There's a guy or a girl in the school next door and someone else doing the same thing. And where there is government legislation, come back to Zoubiya's point about culture and governance from up on high, use that to your advantage. It's not just the school's responsibility to give an example to parents or to teachers that that's not right. Use your local guidelines and, dare I say, laws to support what you're doing to go forward. You're not alone in it. Keep it human, and enjoy it, because at the end of the day, it's there to support learning. Let's look at the positives too.
That's fantastic, David, and that's a very nice ending tone for our session today. Thank you for joining. And also, it's wonderful, and I want to thank all of our panelists for their wonderful, reflective, and amazing insights into AI and online education. I'm sure there are a lot of takeaways that we can take from this, and we are excited to see what comes out next. Thank you, Zoubiya, Olly, Priya, David, Magdalene, and also for the time and effort you've put in for our BSME webinar on online safety.
Thank you, Rehana, as well.
Thank you
for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll stop the recording. If there are any questions in the chat. Seems like people have taken